Let me ask you a question. When you think about the genius behind revolutionary tech, things like reusable rockets or game-changing electric cars, whose name pops into your head first?
I'm going to bet that for almost all of us, one name just springs to mind automatically. It's almost a reflex, right? A massive global PR machine has pretty much programmed us all to have one answer: Elon Musk.
But what happens when we push all that aside? Ignore the hype, the press releases, the carefully crafted online persona, and just look at the documented facts? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to dive deep into a huge pile of court records, whistleblower testimony, and internal company documents to see where the slick PR narrative ends and the documented reality begins.
All right, so let's start with the big one, the myth of the genius inventor. We've all seen the portrayal, right? The guy in the lab, scribbling complex physics equations on a glass wall, single-handedly solving the impossible. It's a powerful image.
But when you look at the actual paperwork, the story gets a little different. His academic record? It shows bachelor's degrees in physics and economics, which is impressive, no doubt. But there's no PhD in physics, no degree in aerospace engineering. So that image of the master physicist, it doesn't quite match up with his formal training.
And this is where it gets really interesting. If you dig into the patent records, you won't find his name as the sole inventor on patents for, say, a brand new physics discovery. You'll definitely see his name for sure, but it's usually on design patents or listed as just one name among a much larger team of brilliant engineers.
Now, I know what you're thinking, but hold on, he's the chief engineer at SpaceX, and you're right, he is. But what the documents show is that chief engineer at SpaceX isn't a formal protected title like it might be in other fields. It's an internal role. His job is more about system integration. He's the guy who hears the options from his expert teams and makes the final call on the trade-offs. He's not personally designing the engine valves.
Okay, so if he isn't the lone inventor hunched over a blueprint, what's his real role in all of this? The documents point to a different kind of superpower. And it's not about inventing new physics. It's about managing extreme risk and deploying massive amounts of capital.
The best term for it is probably an industrial catalyst. Think of him as the agent who has the guts and the cash to make huge bets where governments or traditional companies would just walk away. The risk is just way too high for them. He provides the final say and the money to drag existing technologies, kicking and screaming, into mass production.
And if you want to see that risk in action, look no further than the early days of SpaceX. The first Falcon 1 launch? A complete failure. The second one? Also a failure. The third one? You guessed it? Fail. 3 catastrophic, multi-million-dollar failures in a row.
And that's the absolute key. A company like Boeing, or even NASA in its modern form, would probably have pulled the plug. The financial risk was just insane. Musk's real contribution here was providing a financial shield. His willingness to burn through his own capital gave the actual engineers the room they needed to fail, learn, and try again until they finally nailed it.
So this all begs a pretty obvious question, right? If Musk's job is to manage the risk and write the checks, who are the people actually building the rockets and designing the batteries? The documents shine a light on some key figures, the real architects, who are often left out of the story.
So let's meet some of these hidden architects. You've got Tom Mueller, a legendary propulsion expert who's widely seen as the mastermind behind the Merlin rocket engines, the powerhouse that makes the Falcon 9 fly. At SpaceX, you've got Gwynne Shotwell, the president and CEO who actually runs the day-to-day operations and is absolutely essential to their success. And back in the early days of Tesla, you had J.B. Straubel, the guy whose technical vision for the battery and powertrain basically made the company possible. These people, and literally thousands of other engineers, are the ones in the trenches, solving the thousands of brutal little problems that it takes to make something real.
And this whole pattern of one person becoming the face of a massive team effort, it's not a one-off. Just look at the founding of Tesla. The legal records are crystal clear. Tesla was founded in 2003 by Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning. Musk came on board a year later as the main investor. That co-founder title, he actually got that later through a legal settlement. It's a textbook case of how a public narrative can be rewritten after the fact.
Now, this relentless, whatever-it-takes drive to get things to market, it has a very real and sometimes very dark flip side. The internal documents and court records we went through, they paint a pretty tough picture of the hardcore work culture on the inside.
So what exactly is the price of hardcore? Well, let's look at the documented human cost. Court records show the case of Christina Ballin, an engineer who says she raised safety concerns. Her testimony claims she was threatened with her team's visa status. There's the federal case of Owen Diaz, who a jury awarded over $3 million to after finding he endured horrible racist abuse on the factory floor.
The state of California itself is suing Tesla for systemic racial discrimination. And in Germany, a powerful union has filed complaints alleging that the company is intimidating workers to stop them from organizing.
And that human cost isn't just about big legal fights. It gets really personal. During a round of mass layoffs in 2024, an employee named Nico Murillo, a guy who said he was sleeping in his car to be more productive, he didn't get a call from a manager. He found out he was fired when his badge just stopped working at the front gate.
So you have to wonder, does this kind of high-pressure culture actually affect the cars themselves? Well, in 2023, a whistleblower dropped a bombshell. Thousands of internal documents called the Tesla files, and they showed management knew about thousands of customer complaints about major safety problems, like phantom braking, where the car just slams on the brakes for no reason while you're on the highway.
And hey, you don't have to take a whistleblower's word for it. We have cold, hard data from a third party. In Germany, they had this super rigorous mandatory vehicle inspection called the TÜV report, and their official data shows that the Tesla Model 3 has a defect rate way above the average. It's actually at the very bottom of its class, with major issues cited on things like chassis components. The data is clear.
So, we've looked at the academic record, the patents, the court cases, the quality reports. What does it all add up to? Where does this leave us?
Well, what emerges from all this evidence is a very clear line, a direct chain of cause and effect. You start with a management style of maximum pressure. That leads to a high turnover burnout culture. That culture, which documents show has a history of ignoring safety warnings, leads directly to the quality and safety problems we see in the final product. It's not a coincidence. One thing causes the other.
So really, it all boils down to this distinction right here. On one hand, you have the myth. A singular genius is inventing the future all by himself. And on the other hand, you have the documented method. An industrial catalyst uses huge amounts of capital and relentless pressure to squeeze mass-produced products out of specialized and often totally overworked teams.
And that leaves us with one final, massive question. So much of the financial value of these companies is wrapped up in the public belief in that singular genius myth. So what happens when the documented reality from the factory floor, from the courts, from the safety reports becomes too loud to ignore? What happens when the myth finally crashes into the market?